Okay, everybody, thank you for coming to my senior project presentation. I became Bruce, the lead developer of FNet. But first, who really am I? I am a Colorado native. I'm born and raised here. This is where I'll be for a while longer. I'm currently a senior at Grandview High School. I will be attending I'll be up at the Colorado School of Mines, majoring in computer science, where I hope to get a bachelor's and a master's in a combined program in 4 years. And I've been doing programming for 6 years in a variety of languages. My company I call RogTech. You may be asking, why RogTech? Well, I decided that the corporate vision was to be efficient, cutting edge, and bold. You can see that is reflected in the logo design with aggressive coloring and sleek styling. It's very sharp and forward-looking. What is FNet? This is my project for the year. It is a hacking game / simulator where you have a network of computers and you can connect to any of them and hack them. That's the gist of the game. There is a storyline, of course, where you can actually make progress and uncover the secrets of the FNet, in which your goal is to get to the central database. Why? It's because there's no cure for curiosity. Who doesn't want to know what's in there? Some of the project objectives that I established for myself in this was to become more experienced with programming in C#, which is a very particular programming language, one of the many that are out there, but I particularly wanted to look into that. So I wanted to familiarize myself with the specifics of game development, the coming up of ideas and functionality that I then had to implement over a period of time. Gaining and making the use of feedback was a critical part of this project because what is a game without people who play it? I needed to be able to get feedback and critique from people and then make tweaks and changes accordingly. I wanted to explore the limits of my own creativity as well, just to see what could I come up with in terms of story or features and functionality. And I also wanted to become more adept at being a professional speaker. We'll see how that turns out at the end of this. Some of my project inspiration were these 3 games. HackNet, made by a man named Matt Troviani, Uplink, which is by Introversion Software, and HackMud by Drizzly Bear. All 3 of these are hacking games at heart. This is HackNet, for instance, where you can see, and I think those will show better, that you have a big terminal that you can type commands into, interact with a computer that you're connected to, you can run functions and have memory, and see the entire network. Uplink looks like this. You can see that it looks more like an actual operating system, like if you imagine Windows has a desktop. It looks more like that than not. And this is more the concept of hacking than actually typing commands to do it. HackMud looks like this. This is a very like a very baseline terminal. All of your interaction is through code. And you can actually script commands in this where you create the programs that do the actual hacking. All 3 of these projects were my inspiration for it. This is my expert advisor, is actually the lead developer of HackNet, who is also the founder of Team Fractal Alligator, which is the company he created to represent that. He's been doing work in the Game Maker engine, which is just a game development engine, as well as modding of other video games in his past, before he decided he really wanted to develop games, which brought to HackNet, which is a very, very unique experience. I would highly recommend playing it on Steam, which is a distribution platform for games. My support advisors include Adam Powell, who is a senior projects alum and a good friend of mine, not the greatest of tolerance, of course, but that's why he's here. Michael Hastings, who is a professional game breaker at heart, and my innovation expert, whom I can bounce ideas off of and also have him break my game, if it's even possible. And last but not least, Ryan Hostetter, who is an expert slant connoisseur, but also my entrepreneurial and moral support. Okay. So now we dive into the research. I had a lot of research to do in making this game work. One of the biggest and first and foremost things was data structures, where you have a bunch of data, you need to organize it and modify it. The 3 primary things were arrays, which is basically just a fixed table of data, where this array called A at 0 is 1, A at 1 is 2, the index corresponds with the element. Array lists are just dynamic arrays where you can add and remove to them, whereas you can't do that with those. You have to create a new array if you modified it, which makes array lists advantageous in that matter. And last, dictionaries, where you have a key value pair. For instance, the first name, if you call the first name for the dictionary, you'll get whatever the value is. In this case, it's bugs. last name corresponds to Bunny, and location her. Now I needed to flesh out the actual core terminal, which is the little command line interface where you type the commands and you make it do what you want to. This has to hold all the essential variables for players, such as what's their IP address, like their identifier over a network, file systems, and all of the extended things which I'll cover later. This is the only class that the Unity engine, which is what my game is developed in, will interact with directly. Everything comes out of the terminal interface. The user input will always correspond with the terminal output. I simulated an operating system, in essence, where you have a digital computer. It is basically just a digital computer that you interact with. And operating systems like Linux and Mac OS X are known as Unix-based operating systems. They have at their root a command line interface, and I decided that I wanted to pull file system information and commands from them. So I compiled this big grid of commands and what they do. For instance, if you wanted to see what files are in a folder, for instance, you can use ls. Or if you wanted to move, copy, or delete a folder or everything in a folder, you can do that. And if you need help, there's a help. The computer itself, every computer on the FNet is unique in its own respect. They have many variables such as an IP address, which typically looks like this, where it's a big string of 4 numbers. It's just an identifier that you can use to identify what it is over a network. Computers in particular have a file system, and I used a very simplistic, you have a root directory, and then this can contain folders, which can contain files or more folders, and so on and so forth. It's very simple and it's very basic. This brings me to the next level up from computers, which is connecting multiple computers into a big array, or element, I suppose, where the FNet itself is just a large network comprised of these. It is actually an internet, more of a web than a net, because everything is connectable to everything else, like the actual internet. You can connect any web page, it doesn't matter what you're connected to get there, you can. Whereas in a network, it's hierarchical, it's structured, you can't just directly connect to this computer without going through other ones first. Computers themselves have 2 main types, which are personal computers and servers. This helps me define security functions, which I'll go into later. And the terminal itself, obviously, you can connect to any computer. It doesn't matter what it is. If you know its IP address, you can connect to it. I also wanted to implement a local area network challenge for the player, where you have a network such as this. We don't need a firewall, but you have an access point from the internet, where then you can go through and find the database at the end of it. You don't need a direct connection. That was too easy, and there was no printers, so don't worry about that. This constitutes a lot of the later game, sort of more advanced functionality if you wanted to progress through the storyline. And randomly generating these lands were a bit of a difficulty. I did, however, just use, hey, what was this computer? Because it will always generate one. What is that? And then it will use that to determine what to generate next until you have a certain number of computers in it. That brings us to security. Now, every computer has what is known as ports, both in real life and in my game. Ports are little digital slots in a firewall that allow information to go through it. If you wanted to send a file or download a file or look at your mail, for instance, all that information has to go through ports. Ports can be open or closed, so if a port's open, information will go through it, and if ports are closed, then nothing goes through. 6 available ports. In my game, all ports are closed. The hacking program for actually cracking a password requires hooks into these ports, where you have to open the port first before you can actually make use of the password cracker. And so I just created a password generator where there's just a big list of common passwords on the internet somewhere. I grabbed from that, have every computer generate a password based on that list, and then the password cracker will just look through that list until it identifies the correct one. It does take quite a bit of time, but that can be sped up if you get computer upgrades, think of faster processor, for instance, and so on. This slide exists primarily to demonstrate that there were quite a few issues. What programmer is without their flaws and issues in any program? It was a lot of problems. But thankfully, I did work out a solution to every single one, as a long as portrays my expression. it was a lot of work. I had to do a lot of research. You have to go through a whole bunch of forums on the Unity forums, as well as the actual documentation to work out bugs in my code and also figure out any more particular things, such as, if I look here, this is what most of my code will look like in the engine. That's just what defines functions. For instance, the write function, which will actually give you information in the terminal. I was having the problem where if there were too many lines of text that they would peek over the top because it would keep adding from the bottom and going up. What I did to fix that was limit the number of actual lines there were. And so I calculated that there were about 51 lines. It looks to see, are there more than 51 lines? If so, remove the top. It keeps everything neat and organized. Some code like this, for instance, is just a definition where if you type the change directory command, if it's a double dot, you'll move up out of the folder, and so on and so forth. I have a lot of that in the code. This at the top is that's how all variables are defined in code. If I wanted to list the computers for defining the actual FNet, like the entire network, every computer gets added to that list, and so on and so forth. This is what the actual Unity engine looks like. I took a little screen cap of this to demonstrate one of the issues I was having, where you have canvases. Each, like this window, this gray window is a canvas, that yellow window is a canvas, and the main interface in the background is also a canvas. The problem I was having was that I couldn't interact. When they were all running, I couldn't interact with some of these little buttons, like the typing or the submit button or the little buttons in the top. Not all of them were working for some reason. I realized that I had to figure out after a day and a half that there is a sorting layer. I don't know why Unity does that, but that was just, it was irking me heck out of me at one point in the project. So the outcomes to date. This is just a general screenshot of what the Unity engine looks like on a daily. Whenever I open the program to go and make more functionality, I guess, or debug it or whatnot, I have the main panel and I can do all the UI stuff and design that by hand. I'm sorry. This is the main game. This is what it looks like when you boot it up. You have a terminal on the left. You have a port scanner, so when you actually connect to computers, you can scan them and the information for security will be put out there. You have a little, I think it's easier to see on the screens, but there is a little green dot there that represents your home node. That's green. And you can, every time you connect to a computer, you'll reveal that node in that. And you also have a file here because why not? How else would you read any files? So you can see here that I put in help command because I have no idea what I'm doing. Okay, look, there's a whole bunch of commands. There's a list, ls. Okay, that tells me that there's 4 folders, home, bin, log, and sys, and also a readme. Maybe I should read the readme. I ran the command and boom. Some anonymous person named E is giving me a tutorial and introduction to Udemy. Here is, if you notice in the upper left there are 3 little buttons. That one is golden and it looks like an email, and that means you have the email. Of course, Fmail because it's the Fnet. And so that's just E telling you, hey, this is the email system used. If you haven't already, please see the readme. This is us on the middle button where you have a notepad, so you can put in notes. You will need to put in notes. I'm sure you'll need to keep track of a lot of information because that is hacking in the end. You'll have mission details for when you're actually making progression in the story, information for programming, or not programming, information for hacking programs, or where you need to go will be given to you there. And then there's a little submission box so that you can give to the respective faction any information that they request and move forward. This is what it looks like when you connect to a computer and scan it. You need to be able to scan the computer first in order to review the number of ports open as well as hooks. How many hooks you need. Here, you don't need any hooks, so you can just pass back and get the command straight out. Password. Sorry. Next, this is the second computer of the tutorial. You can see that I've connected to it. I've hacked it. I've opened the port and then run the password hacker. And oh look, there's a protocol trial.txt file that tells you, or gives you basically an introduction to the storyline. I thought this was an interesting way to move straight in from a tutorial into actual gameplay. So somebody by the alias Jazz tells you, hey, go break into a thing and then move on. Doing that will give you an email from them that then starts you off on the missions. Protocol is the first faction in this. I don't know why I went with the name. It just sounded cool, and so Jazz gives you more information and you can just go from there. So the timeline. September was the beginning of the project for me, in essence, even though October was supposed to be the official time. September was when I started the game design document. This is where I really fleshed out, okay, what do I want in my game? This is where all the features come from. I can always reference the document or add or remove from it if I needed to. And that's what I did for, actually, I had that document since before that even. I started that comics. I then started working on the code framework for the terminal and the command line so that you can actually have functionality. There could be file, you could interact with the file system finally, type, do all that sort of stuff. October, I declared the framework era because this is where I fleshed out the base. The foundation for the entire game came out of this month, where I worked on the code framework for the terminal. I finished it, went straight to the file system, figured out how I wanted that to work, and then worked on the port hacking functionality already, which means I had to create the computer system for every computer in the FNet, and so on and so forth. November was the progress stage. This is where I made a bunch of progress in actual functionality, where port hacking now actually worked. You could type, you could connect to a computer, you could scan it, and you could actually hack it like you're supposed to. I then optimized some of the user input code because it was slow in this month, and then I started on the story. This is when I got the idea that I wanted a story because I was considering having an open world game where you could just continue, like you could connect to computers and then go on and go do your own thing on the FNet. But then I was like, that's not such a good idea. So I created a storyline, which is consisting of 3 factions. Similar to the 3-act structure here, I didn't actually reference this when I created that, but it is very, very synonymous with the progression of my game. December is the long, short month because you only have really the first 2 weeks of December to work on it, minus the winter break, which I did not use for this. The framework is this is when I finished actually fleshing that out, and then I had to start handcrafting every single computer on the FNet. That took the next few months, but that was a lot of fun. At the end of December, I took a break and helped my colleague Michael with his button system, which was an opportunity to brainstorm. I got some nice ideas out of that. January, I declared the formal period because I didn't do any actual work on programming or anything in the Unity engine. I just worked on it mid-year, did the journals, all the formal senior project stuff that you know I love, and did my major presentation. So then I started continuing work on the story, which was about 60% done by this point. February, the first 2 weeks were just me continuing, fleshing out every single computer, every single system, making sure that everything worked the way it should have. I added IP traces so that you could connect to a computer and see other computers and jump to those and make actual progression like you're supposed to, which brought me to March. March is when I actually thought of implementing the LAN idea, which is just a challenge for the player, where it would generate a network and you have no idea what you're going into. The security is completely randomized so that you actually have to think about what you're doing. The getting into a government net, like the LAN was actually an idea for a government network that is part of the final, like the little end game of the storyline. So that brought me to the FNet Essential Database, where I actually needed to create that finally and create 6 codes. You need to get 6 codes in order to unlock it, basically, get into it. And the only way to get those 6 codes are to move through the story and keep an attentive eye for any unusual information on any of the servers you connect to. That took me through to the Untouched finale. That is April. It is a color because I did not modify it from my original timeline somehow, where I finished work on it and then started a thorough playtest of the game. I made some minor tweaks, nothing noteworthy according to observations that I made as part of the game development process. Then I got some feedback from a few of my peers. I wish I got more, but I actually will continue doing that. So then I finished my debugging efforts, worked on my final presentation, which brought us to today. Moving forward, I'm actually switching to the Unreal Engine, which is another game engine that is primarily based in C++. Major AAA games are made in the Unreal Engine, for instance. The primary reason for this was that you can see that the UI, the screens might show better, is a lot neater. I could format the terminal and the display into very unique margins, have very tight constraints, and it looks a lot nicer than it did back in the Unity engine, which was actually a pain to set up. This is where I could start to implement my unique twist on the genre, where you have a terminal, sure, but you also have like an operating system display. Like Windows has a desktop, you have a desktop here. In real life, in Windows, for instance, you have a whole bunch of programs, I'm sure you know, like SolidWorks is a program, the File Explorer is a program. I wanted to create a program system like that, they're known as processes formally, where if you wanted to open a file, for instance, if you want to read a text file in real life, you open Notepad. I created my own process system, which allowed me to also implement computer resources. So you can't just have like 300 of those open at once because you're going to run out of memory. Computers in real life have RAM and CPU and processor speeds. This will allow me to implement that much better, and I will continue this for a long time. I will also be implementing this game, or attempting to get this game on Steam, which is a platform for games, where I hope to just, for very cheap, very, very cheap, I'm not looking to get any monetary gain out of this at all, I just wanted to get feedback on the idea, and I think Steam's good. As my bibliography rolls, does anybody have any questions for me? Alan? Anyone? Mr. Ed?
So I'm kind of curious with the three games that you mentioned at the beginning in your game, would these be a good argument for me to have kids playing games to get better at Cyber Patriot and other competitions like that?
Of course, of course. So hacking games like that are not only entertaining, but they're also very, they're infotainment, where it is informational. You're learning something about the process, while not exactly like an actual hacking program or the process of actually hacking. It does get you intrigued into that sort of world, and it can get you interested, and if you actually enjoy the sort of thing, then you maybe want to look into doing cybersecurity. That's what I saw with HackNet and the other games, was those are very, very good opportunities to show people that this is an interesting thing, and that it is becoming more prominent of a thing as we go. And I wanted to tag in myself and do my own little thing to explore the world of cybersecurity.
Any personal experience with how the school filter interacts with this?
Of course I have. I'm sorry, the school filter?
Yeah, will the school filter block those sites or?
Well, for HackNet at least, yes. My own project isn't, because it's a senior project and not a video game, but games don't usually block on the system anyway, so I don't know what to say.
If I can request that they unlock things, they might ignore me.
That's fair. Yeah. I guess if you make the argument that they're educational, maybe you could pass it through, but...
Thanks.
Yeah. Anybody else have any questions? In the back.
So you said brute forcing the passwords can take a lot of time. Is that limited by design, or?
I did that by design, primarily. And of course, it could take any amount of time because the password could be anywhere in that list. Because it's just a big list, and it runs through that list sequentially because most brute forcers do that. It was just for gameplay. It makes it easier to actually associate the concept of hacking. It's not entirely representative of real systems, but I thought it was a neat little thing. And having faster process will make it faster, and your life gets easier as you make progress in the game.
And is that what you're talking about, like the resources and Unreal
Yes.
Engine? So
Yeah, where you actually have speed and it's slow at the beginning, but if you upgrade it, then you can go faster. Yes?
After you're done making this game and making this like public, what do you do after you're done? Will you make like more games after that?
Yeah, I'm always experimenting. I'm always creating random game ideas, and I'm like, hey, I want to think this is a good idea. And this was one of those prominent game ideas that I wanted to flesh out for my senior project. But yes, I would be developing more games, like an indie developer. I do appreciate it. Anybody else have any questions? They don't have to be of hacking merit, of course. Yes? I really, really would. I honestly would. It has been an amazing experience. And you can always, anytime you come up with ideas like this, go for it. You got it. You can do it. I recommend it. With that, do you have any questions?
Okay, thank you.